architecture never stands still. Architecture moves forward with people's new requirements, their particular requirements at the time. And using the latest technology, and it's always been like that. I'm very keen on the idea of sort of pushing the technology. So I'm Chris Wilkinson, the founder of WilkinsonEyre.
I'm Jim Eyre, architect, and I've been working with the studio since around 1986, so very soon after it was first started, when we were a very small practice.
I was very keen on architecture from an early age, when I didn't really understand what it was, but I decided that I want to be an architect. And I did a course in art first, just really for a year, so that sort of was very helpful actually.
So I've always had this sort of strong interest in technology, particularly materials and all those sorts of things. And then I just continued to work on diverse projects. So it could be museums, it could be projects with nature, big glass houses, exhibition, design, and also working with existing buildings.
In the 70s, I worked at Foster Associates, Michael Hopkins Architects, and Richard Rogers. What I really liked was the working closely with engineers, and I liked the idea of exploring new materials and construction techniques. I really enjoyed that. And when I left to set up, I added in another factor, which was art. I felt that there was a good combination of the technical side and bringing in art. It makes it a sort of more balanced approach.
Some of our earliest really interesting projects in the practice were transport projects, and so I worked extensively on Stratford Market Depot and then Stratford Station, which followed it on the Jubilee line. Both really interesting projects, and in many ways sort of were formative projects for us, me, but also the practice in developing our approach to architecture. And I think there were big differences in a way between the two Stratford projects. First one was an industrial shed, really, a super shed.
I wrote a book which is called Super Sheds, and I started it when I was at Foster's, and I was working on these big shed buildings, which is the best way to describe it really. And I was surprised that it wasn't really regarded as pure architecture. So I did a lot of research. It took on an idea that Mies van der Rohe talked about and worked on, which was, he called it the universal space. And I like that idea, and he showed a picture of some walls and furniture set into this huge aircraft manufacturing building shed. And I liked that idea. I didn't know at the time, but it seemed to me that if it was good enough for Mies van der Rohe, it was good enough for me. And I carried on thinking about that. This just happened to get published at the right time because we got on a short list for the Jubilee Line extension and for the big shed at the end of the line. And we won it. And we were only a small practice of about 6 or 7 people. And this was a big project.
And then at Stratford Station, it was a very different approach. It was still about lifting the spirits, but it was more about space and light and the experience of people moving through a station. And just getting excited about how, from a basic idea, a diagram, working with geometry, engineering, refinement, you could create something that would create a sense of wonder for people experiencing it, moving through the building.
By that time, Jim was working with me. And a lot of the team that you'll see today, they started in the early days. So we stuck together, and we're still happy working together. Another thing that came out of that was the Millennium projects, which started in 2000. And the government had a fund for new buildings, and particularly arts buildings.
There's something about bridges that it's almost like they're a defined problem when you design one. You know, there are a number of factors that you have to think about. You know, the diagram, the context, how people use it, where they come from, where they're going to, the city or wherever it happens to be. What makes it special? What makes the solution that you come up with just right for that particular bridge?
Because we started to get recognised with Stratford Market Depot, and we went on to Stratford Station. We got shortlisted for a number of these cultural projects.
Gateshead Bridge was probably the most notable, I think, of the early bridges. We won 5 bridge competitions in a row. It was quite extraordinary. Suddenly we were seen as the specialists. But Gateshead it was all about the location and the way that people moved to that particular structure. And for me, it was about suddenly, can I come up with an idea, you know, an idea that would appeal, obviously, to the people who are making the decision, but would just feel right, almost as if there could be no other solution. And of course, it was this bridge that came round in an arc and had an arch balancing it. It was enclosing space in a really interesting way and making that journey across the bridge somehow extraordinary. But the other thing that was important about it, and I think it's a theme that goes right through our work, is to do with identity, the identity of a place. And we have this going through a whole series of projects. I think it's really interesting. In a sense, they become part of the image of a city, that people associate that structure with, you know, where they live. In that particular instance in Gateshead, local people were very proud of this bridge.
We start by working from the brief, and we spend a lot of time on site getting to know the context. And so each building is very different. So we have I can't imagine how many buildings we've designed over the years, but they're all very different. But they have connections, either visually or intellectually.
So my name is Yasmin Alani Spence. Well, sort of, like I said, I came sort of 6-7 years ago to the practice, and it really is a sort of theme that runs through, and you sense it the minute you come in, especially looking back to the back catalogue of bridges, industrial sheds. And I think the way we take it further now is that, you know, you always look at the brief and you always think what suits that brief. You don't repeat what you do. We don't have a catalogue that we just go back onto. So it's finding the right materials, finding the right technology to fulfill the brief.
We don't limit our boundaries. We like pushing the boundaries in all directions.
When we get a brief, we spend a lot of time talking to the end users. It's a lot of finding out how they work, what they want, what they need, also what they don't need, what we might have been doing for years and years that actually people just do because that's what you do. So we've spent a lot of time, and having worked on campuses and on those sort of buildings, and at schools as well, you know, you have to listen what people want. It's all about listening. I think the briefing stage in the beginning, having the right team with you that is also keen to learn and to listen is really key, the key element of it.
Many of the people that are working here at a senior level, a really senior level, started with us back in the 1980s and 90s and became the directors. And as we get older, those directors are sort of coming to the fore even more. As we expand, you know, Chris and I, of course, we're involved in projects, but the nature of the involvement can change slightly. I feel that you know, I've got so much confidence in all our directors that they're carrying it on in that way. So, you know, we're not giving up yet. You know, we'll keep it going. But I think we've expanded our capabilities through our staff. We like to think we don't have a house style as such, but other people might think we do. So in a way, we don't quite recognize it like that, because somehow every project is different. But I think what's, in a way, that if we had a theme, I think our theme, we would call it Bridging Art and Science.
Leonardo da Vinci said we should look at the science of art and the art of science, and that was over 500 years ago, and I think it's still absolutely correct today that if you need to keep the balance, really.
This combination of art and science, I think, is quite interesting, because we are applying our artistic sensibilities to kind of everything we do, but at the same time, the nature of architecture is about using technology, understanding technology, how do things work, you know, and bringing all that we can together. And I think what it's created is, in a sense, it's about elegant engineering in a way. Guangzhou IFC in Guangzhou, obviously, was a competition that we won. So it was a major breakthrough for our practice in a way, in terms of of operating globally.
Well, I'm Dominic Bettison. I'm a director at WilkinsonEyre. I started here as a graduate 30 years ago, so this is my 30th year. I've been a director about 16 years. Guangzhou International Finance Centre, one of our significant projects from a few years ago, actually. So the project we designed in 2005, and it really represents, I think, a sort of coming together of our architectural thinking, sort of seamless integration of structure and architecture and a real interest also in the environmental design.
Our attitude to how to design a really beautiful and very, very tall skyscraper, it was going to be the tallest by a British architect at that time in the world, was can we sculpt it so that it's not about something interesting at the bottom, a bit in the middle and something interesting at the top? Could it be almost a sculpture in itself?
The tower itself is 440 metres tall. It has 70 stories of offices and then an atrium. It has a hotel on the top with an atrium that runs up through the hotel. The atrium itself is pretty awe-inspiring. You can fit the Statue of Liberty in the atrium, or St Paul's Cathedral. So it really is a building on a vast scale.
And we sort of carried that through internally as well to create, one of the most extraordinary spaces, I think, anywhere, of this 34-storey atrium with the balconies all the way around it, sort of with the crinkly form all the way around it.
So the building is deliberately designed as being very aerodynamic in terms of its shape and the cladding design. And we've actually rotated and orientated the building so that it faces into the prevailing monsoon winds. And they give the building most of its challenges really in terms of the wind load. So by a careful orientation of the building, we've managed to reduce the amount of forces on the building, which in turn has reduced the amount of steel required in the building. So we have something like a 15% reduction in the amount of structural steel that we had to put into the building. So that's very efficient, and it's also very efficient in cost terms as well. And we use concrete-filled tubes, steel tubes. So that's quite an unusual strategy to give the building the stiffness that it has. And the stiffness of the building actually means that it's quite unusual for a building of this height. We don't need mass damping, so the tubular structure gives the building real inherent stiffness.
And I think for me, it's about a rational geometry. It's about making that geometry work hard. So it's functional, super functional, actually, in a way. And at the same time, is it a beautiful form? Is it a beautiful object when you see it on the skyline?
The idea of the sculpture was landscape to portrait. So when you come into the space, you have a landscape. They were rectangles of timber on a large scale. And then gradually they twist and turn into portrait, so that when you go into the Royal Academy, they were portrait, or when you come out, they were portrait. And it just had this twist in a sine curve. That kind of really interested me, getting involved in sculpture on a big scale rather than just architecture. And that actually fed into some of the work that we do. And in particular, there was a project which in a way fits in well with the theme of bridging art and science, which is a tower in Sydney. Called One Barangaroo. Having visited the site, I felt that this tower, the position was so beautiful on Darling Harbour, but it marked the northwest corner of the CBD, the city CBD. And I thought it was appropriate to try and build a tower which was very sculptural. It started with another sculpture that I'd worked on, which involved 3 petals that twisted as they rise up to the sky. It seemed to me that if you connected the tips of the petals, you could create the enclosure of a building, of a tower. And with the curve of it and going up, it became very sculptural. The other aspect of doing something like this, like a piece of art on a big scale, 275 meters high, was the complexity of the technical aspects. Probably, certainly 10 years ago, you couldn't have built it. Maybe even 5 years ago, we were stretching it. So using technology in pushing the boundaries of technology. We needed 3 different glazing systems for the cladding to deal with the different curvatures. The structure was a central core with outriggers, and that required columns on the perimeter. But as the building was shaped like this, these columns they were helical effectively. They had to follow the sculptural form around.
In Gardens by the Bay, it was about how can we produce this moderated environment, cooled environment in one of the most hot and humid places in the world, and do it with low energy, because we had to dehumidify one, but cool both of the glass houses. And that was again about refining a form, beautiful geometric form, refining structures, creating this extraordinary environment, but also doing it by collaborating with nature. And for us, that's where the sustainability point really comes in. It was there on cue, but it's always been there in our thinking. But we used waste biomass. They have trees that grow very fast there. We used the waste biomass that is collected as the key energy source. And there were all sorts of clever systems in that building. But it sort of creates this passion for working with nature. I mean, the history of Battersea Power Station was that it was producing energy locally, as it were, but it was one of the first ones that was producing it on any scale in London, in the city.
I'm Sébastien Ricard, director at the office. Started in the office back in 1997 when the competition came along for Battersea, which has been a long failure project for years because the power station closed out in '84. Between '84 and 2011, a lot of developers bought the site, tried to do something with it, but it's because of the sheer scale and complexity of the building, really struggled with it. And the Malaysian consortium bought it, and they launched a competition, and we got involved and won it. The first thing I thought when I saw the project was I was amazed by the sheer scale of it and the kind of industrial heritage. I mean, when you enter the building before you do anything to it, it's really what strikes you. I mean, to give you an idea of scale, the Battersea Power Station is 3 times the scale of the Tate Modern, which is another power station which was done by Gilbert Scott, the same architect. It's massive, massive. And so it was all about trying to retain an industrial heritage and retaining this idea of scale. And so that was perfect for us because effectively it's a magnificent shed. And how do you do that? With creating new activity in there where the building wasn't designed at all for it. So in other words, think of a blank set of wall, no natural light or barely any natural light, and in there you need to put 40,000 square meters of offices, you need to put 250 plus residential unit, you need to put a series of shops, about 100, 120 shops, an event space, a cinema, all those activity in a building which wasn't designed for that. And that's the fact that it wasn't designed for that is probably one of the most exciting challenge, is how do you, through the quirkiness of the building, create something magic. All our work was about trying to retain the sheer scale and the sense of scale of the building. So we have more than 25 bridges in this building. So it was all about actually creating some thin, elegant bridges, support walkways, allowing not to break the volume. Every new intervention are set back from the existing facade. So it was all about this kind of losing that boundary between engineering and architecture, engineering and art. It was all about trying to find technical solutions which, because they are used in different ways, because they are not how you would think of designing them, create beauty and hopefully have a real sense of purpose. Another example of that is we had to create a transfer structure between the low-level retail and the office space to enable to have sandwich in the middle, a big event space which is column-free. And in order to do that, for instance, we developed this idea of a one single column which become a trees and effectively support 6 columns above that. So from one branch, support 6 branches, which then support 6 columns for the offices above, and effectively 12-story, 10-story are supported from those 3, which come from one column below. And without that, we couldn't have created this kind of floating volume in the middle of this event space. So those are very interesting challenges and exciting challenges. And I think that's what we are about, is this idea of using technology to create amazing, memorable spaces.
So I see that as, the future in that sense is really bright, and I see the practice expanding and continuing to work on, a whole range of projects, commercial projects, offices, but also public realm projects, cultural projects, all sorts, a full range of projects, not to narrow it down in any way. All these projects are really about people because they're about how people interact with them. But it's somehow, if you can make a beautiful object in an extraordinary place, will it uplift the spirits? People will enjoy it. And I've always felt that architecture needs to do that. It's our sort of duty to try and improve people's lives in a very simple way.
Science, actually, particularly technology at the moment, is very creative. It's not just a matter of mass, and it's a creative process. And so it benefits, the people working on it will definitely benefit from studying art and learning to draw, even though they're using big computers. And I think the same is true for the arts. I think the arts have to take into account technology and the way people want to live. And I feel that quite strongly, really, that this is where we will all benefit if you bring the two subjects together.